Mr. Russell for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank both of you for being here. Mr. Horowitz, your continued dedication, and thank you, Mr. Brandon, for your service. I have a lot of respect for the field agents. However, there are some troubling questions that really have not been answered. June to August 2010, we had the Eagle Pass and La Pryor seizures. We know that these firearms are being trafficked. We have obliterated serial numbers, and notwithstanding what we heard in testimony here today from you, Mr. Brandon, about the uncertainty of whether or not something could be seized or we need more laws, it's pretty clear, as you should know, that serial numbers obliterated constitute a real problem, and we can go into what those codes are. With regard to 2010, an ATF agent is tipped off by an FFL, often demonized. FFLs often demonized as the problem for making straw purchases, when the reality is they are the ones linking some of this because of their alertness. And then a decision is made at that point to allow the straw purchase to try to continue when we've already had the Osarios linked and tied with the La Pryor and the Eagle Pass seizures, but yet we're going to continue on with that. So my question to you, Mr. Horowitz, in your investigation, what value could you determine that these agents or others would find by allowing dozens of illegally purchased firearms to continue to walk?
In this review, like in Fast and Furious, I think that's one of the significant concerns we have. This was a different scenario than Fast and Furious, as we outlined, but when you see firearm violations and you have the opportunity to make arrests or take other investigative activity, given the risks associated with them, it's important to do that. The firearms you mentioned at those two seizures had 2 days to 2 weeks of time to crime stats, so
which is a real problem. And so, okay, you can kind of look at, well, within the next month they did make a purchase with an agent, but now we have 40 more firearms with obliterated serial numbers. Mr. Brandon, why did that not result in an instant arrest? We're talking literally scores of firearms now illegally trafficked. ATF's fully aware of it, and yet nothing happens in November 2010. Why was that?
The explanation from the Dallas Field Division, which Bill Temple wasn't in charge of.
Yeah, we would have liked to have heard from him.
But so he used to work for me in Detroit, and he just got to Dallas, I believe, less than a year ago. But I'm not here to defend that, other than that there was a...
Why was no arrest made? Why? I mean, we were talking scores of firearms. We know they're going south. Why was no arrest made in November 2010?
There was a sensitive DEA investigation going on.
Okay. Well, then let's move on from that, because here's another problem that we have. We have the Osarios tied to this, and yet there's some uncertainty on the part of the ATF agents when, by the time they get to February of 2011, they're not sure if they go and they find in the Osarios' bedroom these firearms, whether or not they're allowed to seize them. Well, my goodness, as the only firearms manufacturer in Congress, gee, even I know that if you've got illegal firearms in somebody's bedroom and you had a good warrant to go in and check it out and you got obliterated serial numbers, you're in deep kimchi. So what happened?
Well, sir, I agree with the OIG. The group supervisor for the firearms trafficking group, he failed to communicate that to the agents who were in there. It's... Again, I'm not defending it, and how we've...
And this is the frustration that we have, Mr. Brandon, because what's happened is that, you know, we had dedicated agents like yourself lost their life because people were not doing their job. And worse, we had a desire on the part, which we've been trying to get to the bottom of people to allow these firearms to walk south for reasons yet to be determined. And yet everyone wants to sweep that under the rug. And with regard to my colleagues that have stated about the law and the need for more laws, I would remind everyone the 1968 Gun Control Act requires serial numbers and has. 18th U.S. Code Section 922K, 26 U.S. Code 5861, paragraph G, lays out requirements for what constitutes legal firearms. And it's illegal to possess firearms that have serial numbers removed, obliterated, or altered. Mr. Brennan, are you familiar with Don't Lie for the Other Guy program?
Yes, with the National Shooting Sports Foundation.
Sure, and not only them, but my goodness, for 17 years now we've had that program. Is it or is it not a felony to make a straw purchase? And here we're talking about the need from your own mouth in acknowledgement to some of my colleagues' queries that we need to have a law to prevent this type of trafficking or straw purchases. Are you not aware of the Don't Lie for the Other Guy program?
I'm aware of it.
Do you know what the penalties are for that?
Yeah, there's a 5-year felony and a 10-year
felony. No, it's 10 years, sir.
Oh,
10-year felony for federal crime and up to $250,000 fine. You can find that in U.S. Code 18, Section 924C and E. Be happy to show it to you. Here's the problem. We are talking around this issue. I have every belief that you are dedicated to your job, but right now we have 3 empty chairs, and we have you that doesn't even seem to know what the U.S. Code are. Now, I like to believe that I like to believe that you do know those, but Mr. Chairman, I would suggest that we have a regroup. The ranking member has not been allowed to have his witness here today. We've had others. We've not even gotten to get to the tobacco issues. We need to have some follow-on here. And Mr. Horwitz, I'm very grateful for the things that you've dug up. You've exposed some things. We're grateful for that. Mr. Brandon, I do believe you're dedicated. But I tell you what, it ain't looking too pretty here today. I yield back my time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Could I get a minute?
Mr. Brandon, you're recognized, sir.
Mr. Russell.
I'm out of time, that's why.
I'm aware there's 2 statutes. One's a 5-year, one's a 10-year, so I didn't want you to come away with that. But I would also like to comment what you said about federal firearms licensees. We've built, and that's one of the things under my charge, a better relationship and communication with the federal firearms licensee, because they are the front line of defense in receiving that information. And if you even go on to ATF's webpage yesterday, Twitter, one of the things under my leadership was the number of FFL burglaries that have been happening across the country and FFL robberies, things that weren't tracked till 5 years ago. So I just wanted to share that I have a passion for recognizing we regulated an industry and good, honest, hardworking men and women dealing in a lawful commodity, and that are absolutely vital to our intelligence-led, risk-based way of giving business. And they should have followed up. When that FFL called and gave those names, that should have been an alarm going off. So I just thank you for letting me make that comment.
Thank you, of course.